Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out a black-green +1/+1 counter deck as voted on by my supporters on Patreon, featuring Jenova, Ancient Calamity as our commander. This 4-mana 1/5 says at the beginning of combat on our turn, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Jenova's power on up to one other target creature. That creature also becomes a mutant in addition to its other types, and whenever a mutant we control dies during our turn, we get to draw cards equal to its power. So there's a lot going on with Jenova, but the main goal is to increase Jenova's power by putting additional +1 counters on it, which then in turn gives us more +1 counters on the rest of the team. We also have some sacrifice synergies to maybe sacrifice our creatures in our turn, so while they're mutants we get to draw a lot of cards, and then hopefully we can take over that way. So taking a look at our deck breakdown, we've got a few different categories, starting with mana acceleration, ways to maybe play Jenova ahead of schedule. Mana creatures especially are useful, since at the very least we can put +1 counters on those creatures, and then maybe later they will draw some more cards. Then we've got a ton of ways to put additional +1 counters on our creatures, including on Jenova, so those are quite important. And then we've got a lot of ways to enhance the number of +1 counters we get each time, often giving us an additional +1 counter whenever we get one in the first place, so those are also incredibly useful, since that means more counters on Jenova and then even more counters on the rest of our team. Then we've got some other creatures that play well in a +1 counter deck. Then we've got a few sacrifice effects that double up as interaction, so we can sack our creatures while drawing extra cards, and then some other removal to interact with the opponent's plan. And then our miscellaneous section has a few ways to protect our key creatures by making them indestructible or gain hexproof, and the Ozolith can also move +1 counters around. So that's our game plan. Now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration, there's Chromox and Dark Ritual, setting up some explosive starts. Got some 1-mana creatures to help out, Birds of Paradise, Halfling, can also make our legends uncounterable, Elvish Mystic and the Llanowar Elves, and Utopia Sprawl has to enchant a forest, but then can make an extra mana as well. Then there's Fanatic of Aronas, requiring a 4-powered creature to make 4 mana is not too difficult. Incubation Druid, as soon as we put a +1 counter on it, can make 3 mana without needing to adapt it. And then there's Arcane Signet, and at 3 mana, Connections does a lot of things, including making additional treasures, but the Shapeshifters having the Changeling ability means they also count as mutants, so as long as they die in our turn with Jenova in play, can also draw us additional cards. Then there's Kami of Whispered Hopes, makes mana equal to its power, so also benefits from extra counters, and also makes it so we get an extra +1 counter each time, so it can also put it in this other category. And then Rishkar, when it enters, can give our creatures additional +1 counters, and each creature with a counter on it can tap for mana, so also very synergistic. And Summon Fenrir has perfect synergy with Jenova, as we can play it, find an extra land, then on Chapter 2, when we play Jenova, it enters with an extra counter, can immediately put 2 counters on the Summon Fenrir, and then on Chapter 3, Fenrir dies, likely drawing us a card, since at 5 power it's likely the biggest creature in play, and because a mutant died with Jenova in play in our turn, we get to draw 5 more cards, so that's an excellent way to kick things off. And then we've got additional ways to put +1 counters on our creatures. A lot of them trigger with a landfall, like Bristly Bill, a 2/2 creature with landfall giving us an extra counter. There's also the Scythe Cat Cub, which is quite similar, can also maybe double the counters if it triggered for a second time. And then in enchantment form, we have Ride the Shupuff and a Roaring Earth, also giving us an extra +1 counter with landfall, so that's why fetch lands are also quite useful in this deck. Then the Innkeeper's Talent can also give us an extra counter each turn, maybe eventually double the number of counters if we get to level 3. Ozolith also gives us an extra counter each time, but can also activate to put essentially 2 +1 counters at the very least on one of our creatures. And then we've got the Hollow Merc Siege, one of the upsides of being black-green, can also maybe give our creature that's attacking an extra counter and menace until end of turn, can also draw extra cards if needed. The Ooze, when it enters, gives us an extra counter, and then when it attacks can give us even more. Fight Rigging, also not too difficult to enable, and then a steady supply of extra +1 counters, and then maybe we get to hide away something expensive for free. There's Ornery Tumblewag, another way to get an extra counter each turn, and by saddling it we can maybe double the number of counters on one creature, especially good if we start putting those counters on Jenova. Warden of the Grove, also quite good if we can grow it, and then maybe play Jenova, it can immediately pick up a ton of extra counters. The Tribute can also be a source of card advantage or extra +1 counters. Sas can maybe search up his Chocobo or a Birds of Paradise or land, and can also give us additional counters when it attacks. The Aether Spark, as a Planeswalker Planeswalker, can also maybe equip Jenova, give it extra counters, build up its loyalty, and eventually draw some cards or make mana. Defiler Vigor, also quite good with all these green permanents that we can discount and then give our team additional +1 counters. Railway Brawler makes it so that creatures enter with a number of counters on them equal to their power, can also plot it, so we can maybe plot the Brawler and then on the following turn cast it for free, play Jenova, it already picks up an extra counter, and it can only keep growing from there. We've got the Verger's Gearhulk distributing 4 +1 counters when it enters, so we can put them all on our commander and then spread those counters around. And the Great Henge can also be a nice source of card advantage, and all our creatures also will enter with an additional +1 counter on them. And then we've got our counter-enhancing effects, and the cheapest version at 1 mana is Hardened Scales in enchantment form. If we would get 1 or more +1 counters, we get an additional 1 on top. And then in creature form, there's the Cursed Wombat, only triggers once per turn per creature. Winding Constrictor does not have that restriction. And then Branching Evolution is kind of like you have a doubling season without a token part of it, still just doubling the number of +1 counters. Evolution Sage lets us proliferate with Landfall, so it can also give us tons of extra counters. The Kami we've already mentioned. There's the Successor, pretty similar to the Wombat on a 3/2 with Menace. The Earth Crystal, also a perfect addition, discounting our green spells, giving us that Hardened Scales effect, and can also activate it to give us 2 +1 counters. And then Vraska can also help us proliferate with a 0 ability, gives us removal with a -2, and can also maybe win the game with a -9. Then we've got some more creatures that play well with a +1 counter theme, Sans Chocobo with Landfall getting a counter. There's Emperor of Bones, doubles up as Graveyard Hate, but can also reanimate our own creatures whenever it gets a counter, so that can also happen multiple times outside of the Adapt ability. There's Evolution Witness, can also return a permanent each time it gets a +1 counter, so it can also get a lot of cards back. There's Scurry Oak with Evolve, making a 1/1 Squirrel token whenever it gets a +1 counter, so that can also happen multiple times. Host of the Hereafter is similar to the Ozolith at 1 mana, letting us move +1 counters from creatures that died. And the Market Back Walker, also a good one to maybe sacrifice, as it will draw us additional cards. And then we've got our Sacrifice Outlets. White of the Reliquary can sack a creature to find a land, so also good with our landfall cards. There's a Victimize, sack a creature to get 2 back out of the graveyard. Yawgmoth can just sacrifice creatures at will, and the -1 counters and Proliferate also have good synergy throughout. We've got a Rise of the Witch King. We both sacrifice a creature, but we also get to return a permanent from our graveyard to the battlefield. The Gidrock can maybe saddle a creature and then sacrifice it. And then we've got a Disciple, which can be played as a land or a 6-mana creature to draw us lots of cards. And then our interaction includes Fatal Push. We're pretty good at enabling Revolt. Bitter Triumph can also deal with Planeswalkers. Terra Sunder, another flexible answer. And Gix's Command can also maybe put +1 counters on Jenova and give it lifelink, so also has a bit of synergy there too. And then we can also protect our key threats with these 2 1-mana instants, as well as Ozolith being able to maybe move +1 counters around from creatures that died, so they don't go to waste. And then our mana base has some good utility lands, the various channel lands offering additional interaction or graveyard recursion. We've got Phyrexian Tower, can sack a creature to help us ramp, or use it as a sacrifice outlet to draw cards with our mutants dying. Same with Midgar, can sack a creature to draw to and then still play it out of the adventure zone. And the other adventure land also playing well with a +1 counter theme. Shifting Woodlands, since we're filling the graveyard with fetch lands and other effects, can also enable Delirium to maybe turn into a permanent that's in our graveyard. And then plenty of mana fixing, as we mentioned, plenty of fetch lands as well. And then a few more utility lands here with Karn's Bastion to help us proliferate. And a Reliquary Tower, since sometimes we'll end up drawing 10+ cards with a huge creature dying, so then it's nice if we don't have to discard to hand size. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing Greasefang, black-white vehicles. And our hand seems decent. Terra Sunder, actually pretty relevant in the matchup, being able to exile their artifacts. Turn 1 birds. Don't have a great turn 2 play lined up at the moment. So we'll just surveil with the Windswept Heath, keep up Terra Sunder. Can maybe deal with a ramp artifact. Yeah, Copters also fine targets. would have been able to set up their graveyard for Greasefang, so it's kind of the perfect 2-drop for the deck. Don't need more lands. Play Jenova. Counter on birds. And then next turn we can maybe make each player sacrifice and get a fetch line back. Opponent's also allowed to have removal, but at least Path to Exile ramps us, so it doesn't feel as bad. Back to the command zone, and we can now the Planeswalker to try and take over. Also reasonable to play a couple creatures out first, but against black-white, if they don't have specifically Planeswalker removal, we could draw quite a few cards before they find an answer. Still get to proliferate as well. The rest takes our rise. And Skyclave luckily can't target Vraska. Goodbye, birds. Alright, so this turn probably most efficient is going Saz plus Mystic. Could replay Jenova, but without another creature, that's not incredibly useful. In fact, I could also get Saz Chocobo, which is pretty fitting here. And then play that, then Verdant, a Landfall twice, and play the Mystic. And then we can still go ahead and proliferate with Vraska. Not bad. So no vehicle in graveyard yet for Greasefang to get back. Mire Triton can trade for a large creature, but as long as we make sure it's a mutant, we can maybe draw some cards on the way out. They did mill a Ripskiff, so that can maybe be returned by Greasefang. So opponent goes for their commander. Return Ripskiff, draws a card. And then they might want to attack with it. Don't really want to trade. Would rather have this go back to their hand than to the graveyard. So then I could just jump with an Elvish Mystic. Don't really need the extra mana. Keep Vraska at a high loyalty. Alright, so let's read Saz carefully. So when it enters, we get to search. When it attacks, put a +1 counter on a creature, and then double the number. Okay, so could go for Jenova. And then Jenova puts counter on Saz. Saz puts counter on Jenova. Second main I proliferate. That seems fine. And then if they trade here for Saz, I would get to draw 4 cards. The fact that they're jumping the Chocobo could imply that there's a board wiping coming. But I'll just proliferate here. So we've got a pretty full hand, no maximum hand size thanks to Reliquary Tower. And with Bastion we could proliferate once again, maybe setting up an ultimate and then still have leftover loyalty. Although I'm sure Dark Petition can now find an answer to my Planeswalker, although it'll only have 3 mana to spend right now. So they either get a bigger answer for next turn or something they can cast now. But even without Vraska we're still in a decent spot. And yeah, opponent probably searched up the Bitter Triumph. Does now get to discard the Ripskiff to return it. And they still had an Unearth left, which is probably why they jumped with a Skyclave last turn. Alright, it starts making sense, and that was a pretty brutal turn. Losing our commander as well for the second time. So now it's 8 mana to redeploy, so that's probably not happening. Yeah, things took a turn for the worse. Did not expect to lose 2 of my vital permanents. Dark Ritual can maybe still redeploy Jenova, although a Defiler also looks appealing now. So I can go Defiler, play Warden for 2 mana, play Siege for 1 mana, so I don't even need to use the Ritual. Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. And then we probably go for the Menace effect. So I can get in with the Chocobo. Hit you for 9. Opponent jumping with Skyclave again. They might have another way to reanimate it. The Warden grows. And then we still have Ritual as a leftover to maybe get Jenova in play. Swords my Defiler, at least I gain 8. Play Ripskiff, so nothing in the graveyard for Greasefang to get back. And a Sentinel we can live with. Alright, opponent may be forgetting that Ripskiff didn't have haste. So now if I Ritual out Jenova, I can still use Midgar, I believe. Yes. So then I would get to refuel. I think that's worth it. So Ritual out my commander. I wouldn't be able to pay. And then let's go for additional counters. And then now Jenova gets to put 3 counters and turn something into a mutant. The Chocobo isn't a mutant yet. So if we want to go for maximum card draw, give it Menace. So opponent can survive, go to 1 if they chump my 4/4. And this would have been lethal with a Repast, but the play I really wanted to make is this one. Oh yes. Worth it. And then I could still Mox cast a 1-drop like Fatal Push. And I probably don't need Black Market Connections anymore. Yeah, that was way more satisfying than just attacking for lethal. Don't need to discard to hand size, so I get to keep all of these cards in hand. So I guess I better start sorting it. And then we still have some value lands as well here with the Bastion. Peatland can draw. So looking good. Did our opponent disconnect? They did not. Can I lose from here? It's not impossible, but hopefully this is a more entertaining game. Cling to Dust, exile draw. Opponent going through the graveyard. Not sure if it's to escape or if they have another reanimation effect. Yeah, escape, cling, draw. So they seem pretty dead. Priest. Next turn can maybe reanimate. Alright, we'll put them out of their misery. And there we go, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Gishath, so a dinosaur ramp deck. This hand feels a little too slow and fair. This one's not a huge improvement, although maybe we can put the Kami to work, making a bunch of mana. So I'll hang on to the Vista if I can with Landfall here. And then we could curve Bill into Kami. Gonna mute my opponent's pet since Bolthound's one of the worst ones. Alright, so for now Boseiju. They've got elves. Yeah, ideally draw another untapped lane so I can save Vista to grow the Kami. Opponent settles the wilds to ramp. Alright, I'll go with the Kami. So then next turn, 2 Linefall triggers can put counters on Kami, or I can grow Jenova if I play her first, which probably works out better. So hope they don't mess with my permanents here. Alright, opponent keeps ramping with the invasion. So they are potentially able to cast Gishath next turn. 6, 7, 8. So that's pretty scary in its own right. Alright, so if I go for Jenova, play a land, I get 2+1 counters from the Kami's ability. Could also, let's see, play a land first. No, I think I go for Jenova here. And then I don't have to use my fetch land now, but I probably want to just set up high toughness to soak up an attack from Gishath if possible. And then counters on Kami. And pass. Sure. Now they could still have some white removal spells that deal with Jenova. But then they're not playing Gishath. And in the meantime, Kami can make a lot of mana for us. It's gonna be Colossal Majesty for card advantage. And a Hammer Skull, normally pretty big, but we can go bigger. Alright, so we get to untap here, that's perfect. So this turn we're looking at just emptying our hand as much as possible. And then triggering Fight Rigging in the process. So that looks okay. Maybe need to make green mana here. Play Ozolith using colorless. See what we hit off Fight Rigging. And Vraska looks pretty good here. Play Hosts. And then I can still activate Ozolith on Jenova, which in turn can grow something else. Counter still on Jenova. And Jenova grows, maybe at this point, Bill. Cast my free Vraska. And then I can afford to get in with at least one of my creatures here. Make it Bill. If I attack with both, I force them to chump. Yeah, maybe that's actually fine. Vraska can also maybe minus in my second main phase if needed. So yeah, we truly got to combo off here. And then by proliferating, I grow the hosts. So it can actually block Gishath profitably. Can even add an extra defense counter. And then landfall, grow the host. That's a 12-12, and our opponent concedes. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Vivi, blue-red spells. Our hand's reasonable. Can ramp on 2, although I don't necessarily want to play Jenova without another creature alongside it. For now we can surveil. And then I wouldn't mind finding a 1-mana elf that we can play alongside the Signet. Opponent surveils. We'll let that resolve and then do the same. So they seem to have plenty of lands in hand already. Command Tower I probably still need to take, since we need a few more lands. Yeah, I'll play the Signet. It gives us the option to play Jenova next turn. Don't have to go for it. But now that they tapped out, maybe it's not a bad idea. And then next turn we could play a lower loyalty Vraska. Although double spelling Innkeeper's Talent and Oak is maybe better. Opponents got Vivi, but they're tapped out, and now Rise of the Witch King, a nice answer. Although I don't have a creature to really sacrifice. So maybe it is just Vraska and then minus. And then they get to recast it, potentially. Or I can go Talent into Oak, start making tokens, and then we can set up Rise of the Witch King a bit better. But yeah, I might regret not dealing with Vivi when I had the chance. So, Jenova counters Oak. Talent resolves first, so Oak picks up 2 counters. And then next turn I could play full loyalty Vraska, or we could Rise. Opponent immediately infuriating Vivi, so yeah, they're more of a combo build. So I'm regretting not removing their commander with Vraska. Treasure Cruise, draw 3. They still haven't activated Vivi yet, so they still have 6 mana at the ready. But they won't have a counterspell up in my turn, so we'll see. Reunion, discard, draw, 5 mana left. And now a dig through time. Casting 2 delve spells in one turn was not on my radar. But there you go. Vivi up to 8 power. So unless they find a free counterspell to protect their commander, I should be able to clear it. Alright, Grape Shot, a nice storm spell to clear Scurry Oak and the Squirrel. So now my Rise of the Witch King doesn't look quite as good. Yeah, that was an impressive turn. Opponent still has a full grip. So, of course we have to answer Vivi. And I have to take 9 as well. So, yeah, I guess Vraska is my best option since I don't want to sacrifice Jenova. I guess if I do, I can return Scurry Oak. But Vraska seems like the cleaner answer. Don't know if I should even attack in case of a haste creature on their side. Card like Wild Ride comes to mind, can give a creature haste, and that's likely to be in their deck if they're playing with Infuriate as well. So yeah, I'll just keep Jenova back. Also can't afford to draw too many cards with Vraska since we're at 6. Yeah, the Grape Shot was pretty effective. Otherwise we can just sack a Squirrel to the Rise and be in pretty good shape. Opponent passes, maybe ending our turn here. Magma Opus instead. Okay, so that finishes off Vraska, taps 2 of my lands down. That happens, nothing I can do about it. And then I get a 4/4 token as well. Go to my draw step, floating mana goes away. So if I pay 2 life, I can level up talent twice. Yeah, I guess so. Really need to find another creature. Opponent's got a million cards in hand, so if they have a bounce spell for Jenova, we're dead. Or a burn spell will do it too. Defense grid is acceptable. Strangle your own token just to trigger Vivi. So if they have 2 1-mana spells left, we're dead. They don't. Alright, can now play Cammy, still Rise, but yeah, I imagine we're still dead to Vivi since I can just sack the 4-4. Do I have an alternative? I guess I can return Vraska to the battlefield, so that can still answer Vivi. So play Cammy. First trigger Talent and Jenova, and then second main Rise. And then I guess with Rise, getting back Vraska with a level 3 talent, I guess that's just game, if I'm not mistaken. That's the standard combo. So I could attack. Opponent takes it. Rise. Sack my 21 powered mutant, draw 21 cards. Opponent sacks their token, get back Vraska. And yeah, we've got the Innkeeper's Talent combo. So -9, apply 9 poison twice, which is 18, and that's game. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Ardyn, so mono-black Reanimator, or just demons. Our hand is a little slow, Cammy is unlikely to survive, so then we're left with some pretty expensive cards. This is better. No mana acceleration, but again, most mana elves would probably get removed. So we can play Sans Chocobo, Ozolith can accumulate some +1 counters. And then we can fetch right now to get a Surveil land, maybe improve our draw. Since we don't have anything lined up for next turn. Not really in a position to want to sacrifice the Chocobo to Phyrexian Tower. Although now Evolution Stage is fine, even if we're not triggering a landfall right away. So far so good. Opponent passes. And we are just getting in for 3. And kind of expecting removal on the Sage end of turn. And better Triumph discarding Gristlebrand. Well, that's the perfect setup for Ardyn. Although it's still gonna cost him 8 mana, so they haven't presented any ramp yet. Now I could play Jenova, or I could play the Ooze, which is also better the sooner we get it going. Does not necessarily feel like they have more instant speed removal in hand. So maybe Jenova gets the nod. Because the next turn Ooze can put a counter on Jenova. And then we can also consider sacking our creature to the Phyrexian Tower just to draw in our own turn with a mutant. But yeah, of course our opponent's allowed to have other reanimation spells, and Zombify is probably the best one outside of Reanimate for 1 mana. The good news is our opponent's now down to 8, and I can maybe deal with Gristlebrand through Rise of the Witch King. And an Emperor of Bones also gives us Graveyard Hate for what it's worth. Alright, so we need to Rise, move counters onto Ozolith, and then we get to reanimate something as well. And I guess that would be the Sage or the land. Yeah. Don't really have much of a choice, I don't think. What if Emperor of Bones adapts? Anything to reanimate? Cityscape Leveler? Let's read this carefully. So yeah, I can adapt. Immediately bring back the Leveler. It gains haste. Alright, never mind. So we've got a new plan. And that plan is use the opponent's curve toppers against them. So I need to be in full control just to make sure this works. And then could also, I guess, just use Jenova to put a counter on the Emperor Get back Leveler, since that's exiled, and then Jenova resolves to put a counter on the Emperor. Get a Leveler with haste. Smash. And that should be lethal. Alright, take that. Turn 4 Gristlebrand. Sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Serah, green-white legends. Hand is keepable. Plenty of fetch lands to go with our Ride the Shoe buff. Might actually be fine hanging on to Fabled Passage because of that. And for now, I mean, I guess I do need to Surveil and get a tap land in play, so I can do that now. And then we'll see when we want to play a Ride, or if we want to prioritize Signet. Opponent's going to play some cheap legends to maybe quickly transform Serah, and then discount her more expensive ones. Yeah, that's a pretty aggressive start with a Flowering on 2. I'll Surveil. And a Halfling is perfect, can play it alongside Signet. So that opens up a few more options for next turn. Maybe before playing Jenova, I go Wombat plus Ride. So next turn, their legend will get a 2-mana discount. Emperor doesn't have anything to exile at the moment. Yeah, I guess Wombat, Ride, play Fetch Land is decent, because that sets up Jenova to grow quite a bit next turn, and then we can maybe start blocking. So and grow the Wombat, and then I guess I could trigger it again in the opponent's turn. Yep, so don't need to do it now. So they could cast a 6-mana legendary. Goes for a Relic of Legends first. And now Redan, that's acceptable. Not planning to cast expensive non-creature spells, don't have snow lands either. Serah does transform. So the large flyer could still be a problem. But Basri does not have a good attack, since Wombat can grow up to a 6/7. Alright, so can wait to fetch. Play Jenova. And then play fetch lands, crack twice to get Osolith, although this only applies once per creature per turn. Maybe I do wait to fetch in the opponent's turn, but yeah, either way I think I'm playing the passage. So yeah, we've doubled once per turn already. So then I'll put counters here. Get an 8/9. And I guess I'll start attacking. Have a large Jenova back on defense. Can also start growing the Halfling if I really wanted to. Yeah, just trying to maximize the Wombat triggers. Okay, opponent makes a cat with Basri. Yeah, they could have something large that just wins. Linvala, So no activated abilities, so shuts down my Mana Elf and the Emperor. Alright, could be worse. But it is still another large flyer, so that's the main problem here we're facing. Take 7 in the air, and next turn they're attacking for lethal. So unless I draw removal, I don't think I can present lethal myself. Especially with that life-linking cat. Grow Jenova. Might want to grow the Halfling as well. So we can maybe attack with multiple lethal creatures. And then maybe it's time to cycle Ozolith. Or can I get there if I just cast it? Opponent's got 3 blockers. I need to force them to block with at least one of their flyers, and Linvala plus birds is still lethal. So yeah, I think I'm cycling this. Gidrog, that does have haste. Okay, so a land counter still goes on Jenova. Play Gidrog. Counters on Gidrog since it has Trample. And I guess I didn't get a chance to saddle because of Linvala. Yeah, that stings. Alright, well, all I can do is attack. Since I'm dead on the way back anyway. So opponent can... I guess maybe Halfling still needs to play defense. So I've got 14 trample. I guess our opponent's at a virtual 17. Minus 14. But that does leave them capable of hitting me for 8 in the air. So then if Halfling also attacks... Yeah, I think I gotta go all out here. But I'm pretty sure we're still dead. Because now Basri can just attack on the ground. Small chance a mutant dies and I draw into a removal spell. But even there, they're still Redan maybe protecting their team. Yeah, I wonder how this plays out if we get to saddle the Gidrog. But now we're just dead on the way back. GG's, close one. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing the combo of Muldrotha with Gyruda, so opponent's going big. Hand has potential. I may not need Fatal Push if our opponent's only playing evenly costed cards, although I guess they could still have some 2 mana creatures. Although for now, Chocobo seems fine, don't need to Chromox just yet. And Guardian Idol for ramp, we can't interact with. And now a Ride the Shupuff. So I could Chromox out, Ride, and then play a land. Pitching Fatal Push. Could also go for the white. But yeah, I think we just grow the Chocobo. And then next turn I get to play Jenova. Don't need more lands. Four mana for Atris. And yeah, Vorinclex is a scary one. Hope they can't reanimate it. Yeah, I'll split it like this. Not a disaster if the Disciple makes me discard. And I don't want to show them Vorinclex in case they have a reanimation spell, because then they can actively decide to let it go to the graveyard. Okay, so play Jenova. And then future counters from Ride we can target our commander with, so it can in turn grow the rest of our team. Opponent with tapped Expanse. Gonna see another 4-drop, since of course they are limited to evenly costed cards. A Gonti, pretty good blocker. Although at least if we trade for Chocobo in our turn, we get to draw a ton of cards. But they are getting closer to casting their various commanders. And Victimize could also come in handy. So for now it's Fabled Passage. Could also maybe diversify and put some counters on the whites. But yeah, either way we're growing Jenova. Yeah, I guess I'll start diversifying now, so Jenova can grow the whites. Just send in the Chocobo. Opponent does trade, so we draw 7. And summon Fenrir to ramp seems like the best option now. Also picked up a Reliquary Tower, so next turn we don't necessarily have to discard to hand size. And another counter on Jenova seems fine. Discard Lenor Wastes. Could have also discarded a Gear Hulk to set up the Victimize. Was certainly an option. Jenova Horror can now bounce our commander. At least I'm glad I diversified a bit. So now do we maybe ditch the Gear Hulk to set up the reanimation play? Don't hate it. Okay. So cast commander before I play a land. Grow my commander. And then Victimize now, sacking the Fenrir. All counters on Jenova. Go to attackers, and then probably just grow the white as much as possible. Could also potentially put counters on, let's say, the Chocobo, and then sack it to the white to draw a bunch of cards. And that's also reasonable, just to diversify a bit. But I think we're already diversified enough. Hit you for 13. Have enough cards in hand already, so let's just pass. Thassa to flicker Jenova Horror. It's pretty effective. Next turn we can Triumph it. And Disciple to make me discard. Probably don't need Tribute. We'll draw cards in other ways. Also can't forget about Shifting Woodlands. So imagine they're gonna bounce the whites. Do I want to activate it in response? Sack a creature to get a land. It doesn't seem all that important. And then discard probably the white itself. Too slow to redeploy. Alright, so first play some of these creatures out before playing a land. And then still have better Triumph for Jenova Horror. Counters probably always on Jenova, unless we're going for a lethal blow. But for now that seems okay. And then Jenova target the Trampler. Smash. And that seems lethal to me. Exact sees if they chump Jenova. And there we go, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Squall, black-white. And our hand seems functional. Halfling sets up turn 2 connections. And that can do some other cool things, like making treasures, drawing cards, and the shapeshifters being mutants for Jenova is also relevant. Keep fetch land in hand for potential landfall purposes. And hope they can destroy my enchantment. Thieves' Tools, a way to make their creatures unblockable, to set up their commander. And I'll choose all 3 modes for now. Fatal Push is also excellent, especially with revolt enablers like the treasure. Okay, so this turn I'm looking at Jenova or maybe the Earth Crystal. Can also plot the Brawler. So we have a few options. Kind of like Jenova, since we have a way to protect it from destruction effects at least. Opponent's gonna exile a creature with mana value 4 or greater. So yeah, that gets around indestructible. We don't give hexproof. So that was a good answer. Alright, so playing Earth Crystal or plotting would have worked out a bit better, as it turns out. Once again, gonna choose all 3 modes. And then now it might be plot the Brawler, so we're also not necessarily overextending into a board wipe. But I could still play an Elves. Hit for 4. And then now I have to be a bit more conservative with my life total with the connections. It's gonna be a Disciple, that's fine. I'll lose an Elf. And then for now just make a treasure. Alright, so I could go Brawler into Jenova. Question is, do I want to play Crystal first? Then Jenova costs 5. I would be tapped out of my protection spell. So that's probably not worth it this turn. Jenova has 2 counters. Can move those onto another creature, hit you for 9. And then if I wanted to play around something that exiles my board, I could Fatal Push my own creature just so I draw a few cards of my mutant dying. Let's hope they don't have a farewell here. Alright, containment is acceptable. Turns it into a treasure. Can still sack it and then use Witness to get the Brawler back. Scurry Oak can help me go wide. Alright, so start with Earth Crystal. Play the Scurry Oak first, perhaps. Then Witness triggers Evolve on Scurry Oak. Get an extra counter from the crystal, make a token. And then we can go to attackers. Can I present lethal if I Fatal Push? I guess I can. So that's potentially worth a try. Go to attackers, 2 counters on a creature that can attack this turn. And that's 15. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Azusa, mono green, ramp. So they might be casting some huge Eldrazi. Our hand's pretty decent as well, got some good ramp. Turn 1, start with Llanowar Elves. Just get an Overgrown Tomb. I guess it could backfire since I probably have some Field of Ruin-like lands. But now I've got a forest I can enchant with Utopia Sprawl. Play a Summon Fenrir. And then next turn Jenova, following up summon Fenrir is perfect. As it'll pick up a +1 counter, and then when Fenrir dies we get to draw even more, as it's already going to be a mutant. Okay, so play Jenova, play tapped land. Hit you for 5, and then mono green's unlikely to have answers unless they can disenchant the Fenrir. So we're off to a great start. And Ghost Quarter can destroy my lanes. So it can also blow up the Utopia Sprawl in the process. But going for Azusa instead. Couple of lanes. Okay, so we draw 1 of Fenrir, and then 5 more from Jenova. Okay, now we want to maximize our +1 counters. So Cub and Evolution Sage are going to be the priority. Play Cub. Play Sage. And then I can fetch, still play the Wombat. So counters on Jenova. Proliferates. Landfall again. And then first we proliferate and then double, I suppose. Then Wombat. Now Jenova gets to put 10 +1 counters somewhere. And we'll put it on the Trampler. And hit you for 9. Opponent doesn't have the green mana to jump and activate. So it's just a jump. Alright, let's see how they get out of this mess. So they've got 7 mana. Could be 8 with another lane. Nylea's Intervention. Find 5 lanes put in hand. But I'm pretty sure we can present lethal next turn. Vraska can just clear a path. Although we might be able to present 3 lethal attackers. With Jenova moving more counters around, have another fetch lane, so... Gain 2 of Fountain. Probably not making the difference. Alright, so... I mean, the easy play is just Vraska minus. The more fancy play is maybe... Play fetch lands. Fetch again. Alright, so we got to see this black-green +1 counter deck in action, and yeah, there's a lot of ways to approach it. Since we're missing the mutants from Fallout on Arena, we're focusing more on the +1 counter synergies as opposed to going for more mutant synergy, but you could also turn it into more of a sacrifice deck. But yeah, I've been liking this approach so far. The fact that we don't have a ton of removal means we're going to be weak to cards like Tifa out of the mono-green kind of combo landfall decks, so that's going to be a pretty poor matchup that I've run into a few times, since that's one of the more popular commanders at the moment. But eventually I assume they're going to move Tifa into the Hell queue, and then you probably don't have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.